Over a single century, a quiet intersection of three continents cracked open and reformed into one of the most heavily fortified, contested landscapes on Earth. In the late 19th century, this was an Ottoman province of roughly 500,000 inhabitants. The population was 85 to 90% Arab, mostly Sunni Muslim alongside Christian communities, while long-standing Jewish communities made up about 5 to 7%. They lived under the Ottoman millet system, which granted religious minorities internal judicial autonomy. By 1967, the region was defined by a sovereign Jewish state, a massive Palestinian refugee population sitting in exile, and over 1 million Palestinians living under direct military occupation. We are going to track the precise mechanical steps, the demographic shifts, the diplomatic promises, and the military offensives that drove this total change in land and power. In the 1880s, the native population was largely agrarian. The land was worked by tenant farmers, known as fellahin, who cultivated crops like wheat, citrus, and olives on communal village lands under traditional Ottoman titles. At the same time in Europe, Jewish life was under severe threat from violent, structural anti-Semitism. In 1896, journalist Theodor Herzl proposed modern political Zionism. He argued that the Jewish people required a sovereign national homeland in their ancestral biblical territory to ensure their survival. This table details the demographic result. During the first Aliyahs, tens of thousands of European Jews arrived in Palestine, systematically purchasing land from absentee Ottoman landlords. As the socioeconomic column shows, these settlements enforced Hebrew labor, requiring landholders to hire exclusively Jewish workers. By cutting off Arab labor, this policy led directly to the eviction of Palestinian tenant farmers who had worked those specific lands for generations. This economic dislocation birthed the first organized political resistance from the native Arab population. When World War I collapsed the Ottoman Empire, Great Britain assumed control over the Levant. Britain made 3 contradictory pledges. McMahon Hussein promised Arab independence, Sykes-Picot carved out colonial zones, and the Balfour Declaration supported a Jewish national home. Consequently, the Jewish population spiked. Fleeing Nazi Germany, over 200,000 refugees arrived, driving the demographic proportion to 30% by 1939. Facing the prospect of becoming a minority, the Arab majority launched the Great Arab Revolt in 1936, a nationwide uprising targeting British forces and Jewish settlements. The British military response was overwhelming. They deployed 20,000 troops, executed mass detentions, and exiled the primary Palestinian political leadership. Over 5,000 Palestinian Arabs were killed. Britain successfully suppressed the revolt, but stripped the Palestinian population of their weapons and dismantled their organizational capacity right before the decisive conflict of 1948. In 1947, the UN passed Resolution 181, partitioning the land, 56% for a Jewish state, 43% for an Arab state. But the demographic split column reveals extreme tension. Within the proposed Jewish state's borders, nearly half the population, over 400,000 people, would be Arab. Arab leaders rejected the partition, and the territory fell into civil war. When the British mandate officially expired on May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion proclaimed the establishment of the State of Israel. The following day, military forces from 5 neighboring Arab nations invaded, converting the civil conflict into the First Arab-Israeli War. Better organized Israeli forces expanded their control to 78% of mandatory Palestine, and the proposed Arab state failed to materialize. For the native Arab population, the war was a catastrophe known as the Nakba. Through wartime terror and direct expulsion, over 400 villages were depopulated. Between 700,000 and 750,000 Palestinian Arabs were permanently displaced from their homes. The UN passed Resolution 194, stating that refugees wishing to return to their homes should be permitted to do so. Israel refused, asserting that absorbing a hostile population would destroy the demographic Jewish majority of their new state. To manage the fallout, the UN established UNRWA. The displaced population dispersed into the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and neighboring countries, retaining their refugee status for generations. The 1948 war successfully established a sovereign Jewish state, but shattered Palestinian society, embedding a geographic crisis into the bedrock of the region. In June 1967, Israel launched a preemptive strike, capturing Sinai, Gaza, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. The UN's Resolution 242 demanded withdrawal in exchange for peace. Instead, Israel established a military government to control the 1 million Palestinians now under its jurisdiction. The 1973 Yom Kippur War altered the region's diplomatic trajectory. A surprise coalition attack led by Egypt and Syria pierced Israeli defenses, causing severe political trauma before Israel eventually repelled the offensives. The 1978 Camp David Accords neutralized Israel's most powerful military adversary, Egypt, securing its southern border. But the red column shows a different reality. This separate peace fractured Arab unity, leaving Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza isolated, while Israeli settlement construction accelerated. With the Egyptian military removed from the battlefield, the regional threat of full-scale war faded. In its place, the conflict morphed into a deeply asymmetrical, indefinite military occupation over the Palestinians, shifting the theater of conflict entirely. Over 100 years, this territory transitioned from a localized dispute over land purchases and tenant farming into massive state-on-state warfare. Today, the region is frozen in a holding pattern. An advanced sovereign state presides over a fragmented geography, administering military rule over a stateless population. If you want to know why this conflict persists, look at the international legal pillars built to solve it. First is the unresolved question of sovereignty and borders from UN Resolution 181. Second is the unresolved status of millions of stateless refugees from Resolution 194. And finally, the unresolved tension between occupied land and state security from Resolution 242. The contemporary crisis is the direct result of these three foundational pillars of international law failing to materialize on the ground. Over a century, these solutions were engineered into existence, yet they remain absent from the lives of those living between the river and the sea.